Okay, let's look at our next unit in English. It's called The Nature of Language. Today's lesson is called The Origin of Language. Our goal is to recognize competing theories on language development. Let's look at our vocabulary words. I'm going to read a definition and then say a word. I want you to repeat the word after me. Study of cities, artifacts, and customs of the ancient world is archaeology. A phrase or expression whose meaning cannot be understood in the ordinary sense is an idiom. A person who studies the history and structure of language is a linguist. Having to do with language or the study of languages is linguistics. Communication that does not use words is nonverbal. The branch of linguistics dealing with pronunciation is phonetics. The branch of linguistics dealing with meaning is semantics. The branch of linguistics dealing with word order is syntax. The languages of people or nationality are tongues. Okay, so let's go ahead and get your English notebook. Go ahead and skip a space wherever you're at. I don't want you to go to a new page unless you're out of room. Go ahead and draw a line under your notes right there so we know that we're on another unit. Go ahead and write today's date. And today we're talking about the origin of language. I'm going to abbreviate that. Many of God's creatures have some form of communication. One worker bee tells the other workers where to find the sweetest blossoms. Dolphins send underwater messages to other dolphins. Even a Venus flytrap, the little plant which literally eats insects, has to send out some form of communication to lure the bugs its way. Animals, however, lack the mental and physical capabilities of developing sophisticated vocabulary and syntax. Have you ever listened to a dog? All it does is bark. Okay, it doesn't have any form of verbs or nouns. It just barks. But it's a form of communication. Okay? Only man has language, a unique system involving listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Okay. So we said that language involves listening, put it down here, listening, speaking, reading, and writing. You're going to investigate a few things that will help you understand and use our very flexible language to better advantage. Whether you're preparing yourself to be a lawyer, a mechanic, homemaker, secretary, teacher, or maybe even the President of the United States, you can profit from this study. When you know what our language consists of and where it comes from, you'll become more skillful at using it. As you become more careful with your pronunciation and spelling, increase your vocabulary, and improve your voice control, you'll find that even adults will listen and with respect to what you have to say. What do you think when you hear the word language? Do you picture someone speaking in a language foreign to yours? Do you picture a book containing information to learn? Or a facial expression conveying an unspoken communication? Spoken words, written words, and nonverbal expressions are all language, and all three types of language are necessary for communication. So we said that there are three types of language. We said there are spoken words. That's also known as verbal. There's spoken words. There's written words. And there's nonverbal. We went and saw Chasing the Giants when it first came out. And when it was over, everybody stood up and clapped. Nobody said anything. But the clapping is a type of nonverbal communication. We didn't say anything, but it showed that we supported the movie. Okay? If you give somebody a thumbs up, that's nonverbal communication. Or if you do this, that means come here. You don't have to say anything. Those are all forms of nonverbal communication. Okay? So let's talk about source. One theory is that man created language while emerging from his savage state. Primitive humans began to make themselves understood by a series of grunts and groans. These sounds, accompanied by gestures and facial expressions, gradually over a period of hundreds of years led to words. Words led to sentences, sentences led to more complex syntax, and finally, an idiomatic expressions and semantics. But that's not the story that the Bible tells us. We said that language involves listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We said there are 3 types of language: spoken words, written words, and nonverbal. So now let's talk about where language came from. So we're going to write source. I'm just up here because I'm out of room. Just go to the next line, keep writing. There are people that don't want to believe the Bible, and so they believe that language started, okay, I'll do it like this, unbiblical. That's how I'll word it. I don't want you to think that I actually believe this. Unbiblical belief says that we started with groans and grunts, and those led to words, and words led to sentences, and it just kept getting more and more complex. That's not what the Bible tells us, is it? What does the Bible say, do you know? A literal interpretation of the Bible tells a different story. We can infer from the biblical account of creation that man had his language ever since he has been man. Genesis 1:3 states, and God said, this statement is repeated several times in that first chapter, and God said. When Adam was created, God communicated with him. Adam communicated with God. There were no groans and grunts. Okay. So man was created with language. It didn't have to develop. God gave him language. Okay? We can also infer that to a certain extent, man helped create language. In Genesis 2:20, we are told that it was Adam that gave names to the animals. So man helped create language. And what that means is Adam is the one that made up the names of the animals. Okay, that's what that means. Alright? Naming things was the first use of that language, other than communicating with God. Ever since then, we have been giving names to things that we discover and invent. Okay. So what is the source of language? People that don't believe the Bible, unbiblical people, say that we started with groans and grunts, and that led to words, and that led to sentences, until we got to where we are now. But the Bible says man was created with language. Man helped create language when he named the animals. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the background of language. Okay. Background. Archaeological evidence indicates that for a long time, humans have had more than one fully developed language in which he was able to write phonetically and idiomatically. That is, he used sounds and word meanings in more than one way. This use of semantics shows that flexible, expressive languages were being used everywhere that man was, at least several hundred years before Abraham. Language has developed in a number of ways. Linguists study cultures and writing and can determine a great deal about the growth and development of language. By looking at the commonalities in languages and the studies of word parts known as morphology, linguists can determine what languages are most commonly related and, consequently, probably developed out of the same ancient languages. For example, people emigrate from their old countries and bring new words, things, and ideas to their new countries, slowly altering the language of their new homes. So we said that man's language was fully developed and they said at least several hundred years before Abraham. Several hundred years before Abraham. I mean, we believe that God created, when God created Adam, that he gave him a fully developed language, okay? This is saying that this is what they're able to prove by archaeological evidence. They're able to prove that, okay? And we also said that when you move to a new home, you bring your words with them. So immigrants brought new words with them. Okay? We said the background of language. Language was fully developed. They've proved that language was fully developed several hundred years before Abraham. And immigrants brought new words with them. Alright? I want you to go ahead and study your language and go ahead and answer the questions.